Hi, and welcome to episode 87 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson, PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada.
I'm Heidi Parker. I'm a postdoc at the University of Texas at Austin, but I'm writing manuscript in New York City.
Woo, manuscripts. Big city manuscripts, in fact. We're back. We had a week off last week. It was Labor Day. You know, we don't labor on Labor Day. Because we're grad students, or at least I am. That was the wrong answer, I know, for everybody in academia. Too bad. Anyways, this week we're back, and this week we're joined by Dr. OConnell, who is a Bauer Fellow at Harvard University. Hi, Lauren. Thanks for joining us this week. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm super happy to be a part of this.
You don't need to suck up. We'll be nice to you.
So do you want to start out by just giving us your basic elevator pitch of your work?
Sure. So I work on behavioral diversity in poison frogs, and so I use them to study the neural basis of behavior, because poison frogs in family Dendrobatidae are awesome parents, and they have a lot of species diversity in parental care strategies. And so what I study is the neural circuits that promote parental care in both males and females, and how this differs between species. And then so that's one part of my lab, and then the other part of my lab studies chemical ecology, and we're basically trying to ask the question of how poison frogs get their toxins.
Awesome. So do you keep frogs in your lab then, poison frogs?
I do. We have a huge lab colony we have a bunch of different species. We have around like 500-ish adult frogs at any given time. They are not poisonous though, so they get their toxins from their diet, and so we feed them Drosophila, which means that none of them are toxic in the lab unless we're making them toxic on purpose.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. So is it hard to get permits for all of those frogs, or where do they all come from? Are they collected from the wild?
No. So most of the frogs we have in the lab are species that are very popular in the pet trade. And so these frogs are very popular pets, and they've been that way for the past 3 decades. So when I established my lab, it wasn't the first academic colony, but it was maybe the 5th in the U.S. And I basically talked to a bunch of pet trade people on how to rear them, and I bought them all from captive breeding programs.
That's like my dream, to have 500 pet frogs. I mean, my childhood dream. I don't know if it'd exactly be my dream now, but yeah, that must be amazing. I'm sure it's really easy to get undergrads to come and work to take care of.
Yes. Sure. Well, yeah, all of them. For some reason, all of the undergrads really like projects to do with toxicity. You might think toxins are cool or something, and then that field work is also cool. And so most of the undergrads I have in my lab actually do field work and do chemical ecology work. It's actually kind of hard to get an undergrad to care for the frogs in the lab. For some reason, they all want to go to the field.
You've got too many attractive positions and things going on.
Maybe.
Cool. So let's start with the chemical ecology stuff, and we'll move on to the good parenting advice later. So the chemical ecology, can you explain a little bit why they're not poisonous in the lab? Because you're feeding them Drosophila. I understand this is still stuff you guys are working on figuring out, but
yeah, well, they get their toxins from the arthropods that they eat in their native habitat. So they specialize on eating ants and mites. And the ants and mites that they find in their native habitat, so these are rainforests in South America mostly, carry these toxins. And so the frogs specialize on these arthropods and then sequester the toxins from the arthropods that they eat. And so when in captivity, when we feed them Drosophila, the Drosophila don't have any of these toxins, and so that renders them non-toxic. So what we study is how they get the toxins from the gut, where they've eaten these arthropods, to the skin, which is where they hold the toxins in these granular glands until they release them in some type of stress response, like when they're in a predator's mouth or something like that. So we study that sequestration mechanism, but we also do a lot of population variation and what populations have which kinds of toxins, and then also trying to relate that back to what kinds of bugs that they eat. Because really the diversity of poison frog toxins is reflective of arthropod diversity in the rainforest.
Is it also in any way reflective of the predators?
Good question. So most of the toxins target ion channels in the nervous system. And so there have been a lot of studies where they inject mice with different kinds of toxins to look at the physiological effects. Most of the toxins people think are more to deter predators because they taste bad, and then rather than straight up killing them. Which kind of makes sense because then there would be no predator learning, right? If you killed the thing that was eating you, and so that predators learn not to eat them, it's thought that their toxins just taste really bad. But they do target vertebrate and invertebrate ion channels.
Interesting. So I'm going to switch gears to the parental care. So what does parental care can mean many things in the animal kingdom. In frogs, what does it look like?
Okay, so well, generally frogs, that's a really big topic, parental care in frogs, because there's so many species that do parental care, and they do this in a lot of different ways. But in poison frogs, so in the family Dendrobatidae, what they do is that they lay the eggs on the forest floor. So these are terrestrial frogs, and so they lay their eggs on the leaf litter, and then one parent, either mom or dad, depending on the species, guards the eggs to protect them from egg predators, but they also hydrate them to keep them moist and from drying out. And then when the tadpoles hatch, they get a ride piggyback style on mom or dad, and they take them to a pool of water where they grow up. And then in some species where moms are involved, they come back every 3 to 4 days to feed them eggs. And so they visit their nurseries throughout their territory in the rainforest and feed their offspring until the offspring grow up and into froglets.
And so across all dendrobatids, how many, like what percentage is it like both male and female parental care? Is that pretty rare?
Yes. So all dendrobatids show parental care. Most of it male-only parental care. So only dads are involved. And then there are 2 clades where different parental care strategies have evolved. One is Renomatea. So this is the imitator poison frog, and they're monogamous and biparental. And so they raise their offspring together. And then in the clade O vaga, moms do most of the parental care. And so only in one clade is it both parents caring for offspring.
Okay, so I always wonder this because you work in parental care, but in the strict definition of parental care, if you're only saying that it's some kind of investment by the male or female that would give benefit to the offspring, would you consider a foam nest parental care?
I generally consider parental care as like post-fertilization. So where they take care of the offspring as they're developing. I think of foam nests as pre-fertilization.
Well, because they could still be fertilized in the male.
I don't know.
And the male could be making the foam nest. Because I've heard people say, some Sicilians, the babies eat the mother's skin.
Yeah.
And people consider that parental care, and I think that's a really big stretch.
Well,
because I don't know if laying there and letting your babies eat your skin.
Well, it's definitely to the benefit of your offspring. And they probably only let their offspring do that.
Yeah. Probably.
There's no neighbors coming into that.
Yeah.
This is the kids only.
That could be. That's true. Interesting. So, where all places have you been to do field work?
We mostly do field work in Ecuador with the little devil frog. Ophaga sylvatica, but we actually just got funding from Nat Geo to do work also in Madagascar, because there's this independent evolution of poisonous parental carrying frogs called mantellas in Madagascar. And so we're trying to work on the mechanisms of how they sequester toxins and how they care for offspring to see if the convergent evolution of these traits relies on similar mechanisms.
Yeah, that's amazing. You'll love them. Mantellas are beautiful.
Yeah, so I mean, we have them in the lab, but you know, there's just something different about seeing them in their native habitat.
Yeah. Also lemurs, right? Like lemurs. It's a pretty amazing country.
I'm kind of hesitant about lemurs. I feel like they might be troublemakers.
No, they show no fear, and you have to go and see an Indri. They're it's amazing. It's like half gummy bear, half toddler. It's so weird. It's a very amazing animal. But yeah, that's really cool. And you'll be working with Miguel Vences, right?
Yes. So he's our collaborator for our Madagascar work.
That's pretty awesome. Because I know a lot of money for these types of projects comes from the NSF. What is your outreach when you're in Ecuador?
So our South American outreach, we've partnered with this amphibian conservation center called Centro Humbato. And what they do is they do a lot of outreach to school-age children. And so what we do is they bring school children will come and visit the center and look at all the amphibians that they have captive there, and then we'll talk to them about conservation and climate change and things like that. But what I really focus on my outreach efforts in South America is more towards my South American colleagues. So I teach a bioinformatics course there for South American scientists to teach them how to deal with next generation sequencing data and to kind of get them up to speed on some of these emerging technologies that then they can use in their own projects.
That's awesome, man. I know Morgan had mentioned this before, but I'm going to steal his question. So you're a Bauer Fellow. So you're not really a postdoc, but you're not a PI?
Some people call it a super postdoc, but yeah, we're like half and half. So there are other fellowship programs like this across the U.S., so you're half postdoc, half PI, and what they do is they take really young, naive people who need to who need money and resources to really address a question that they have that they probably couldn't do anywhere else, or they couldn't get money to do, like the neural basis of parental care in poison frogs. No one had done that work before, and so it would have been impossible for me to get federal funding to be able to do that. And so this is an opportunity to jumpstart somebody's career when they have a new idea but need the resources and people to help them along their path. And so, and I mean young and naive because we're usually within a year of finishing our PhD when you start the program. And so you're given a lot of money and your own lab and postdocs, and you're kind of thrown out to water, and it's kind of scary in some ways because you sink or swim, and part of the scary part of being a PI is that if it doesn't work out, it's completely your fault. There's no PI there to save you in a way. I make that sound really scary, but it is. I think I have the best job because Harvard gives me money and resources and mentorship and 2 postdocs to be able to pursue my own ideas during my super postdoc years. And then, I can establish something brand new and then take it with me whenever I get a real job somewhere.
So how long is the fellowship?
It's 5 years. Yeah, which is a good amount of time because you lose a year trying to set up and figure out what you're going to be doing, and then it's a good amount of time to really get some things off the ground and accomplished. So
I think it's a really cool program. I wasn't familiar with it or had heard anything like it, but when I was looking through and doing some research for today, I think one of the promotional videos on the Harvard website or on your department website was almost called it like a venture capitalist program for academia, where they, throw a whole bunch of money behind, a couple of big idea people or people that they're taking a bit of a risk on, and almost all of them, they sounds like, have paid off. Like, it sounds like pretty much everybody who's gone into this program has ended up at a high-ranking university at some point.
Yeah, all of them have gotten jobs. Somewhere.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to have. So the thing with venture capitalism, from what I've seen and heard, is it's super competitive. So is the same true for the Bauer system?
Yes, and I think it's super competitive because, sometimes more so than tenure track jobs, because it's really open to all areas of science. And so when it's open to physicists and computer scientists and chemists and just all sorts of people, and we try to pick the best from this huge pool. And so in that regard, it's really, really competitive, because you have everybody from all aspects of science trying to come in and get these kinds of positions. And so the way we kind of weed it down into the final candidates is that you have to have a really creative idea that you probably couldn't do somewhere else. Like this is your only opportunity to get your ideas off the ground, but you have to display some type of independence. Like you have to be able to float on your own and be able to mentor people in your lab. And so a lot of people only think about the science side, but they don't think about all the things that happen aside from science, like mentorship and budgeting and all these other things that go along with being a PI.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that's one of the not taught things that a lot of people get in their PhD program, is that you are really working as a small business that's broke at all times.
Yeah.
and you have people depending on you at all times as well. I'm just observing. I'm still one of those broke employees, so that's just my input on the system. But yeah, I think it's a really cool program because it gives you that almost carefree chance to experiment and really push the boundaries of what you can do.
Yeah, and I think something else that's great about these kinds of positions is that everybody does something very different. So I grew up in an ecology and evolution and neuroscience department, and I never really talked with like physicists or chemists or things like that. And so each of the fellows does something very different, and we're kind of thrown in together. And so there are collaborations and ideas that are thrown around that probably I wouldn't have encountered if I had stayed in my zone of comfortable science. And so that's the other thing that I really like about these kinds of programs, is that they're super interdisciplinary, because everybody comes from a different background. We're all kind of thrown together in the same space, and then the ideas, great ideas are born from that. So.
That's great. So you also have the L'Oreal Women in Science Fellowship for this year. Yeah. Did you feel very honored to be representing, all of these women?
Well, of course. The L'Oreal for Women in Science Fellowship was amazing. Because I have enough money to do some of my work with behavior, but I don't have extra funds to really do this chemical ecology work. And so I was running out of money to do that kind of science, and then the L'Oreal came at the right time, and I was really able to see that side of my lab, and that work is mostly done by undergraduates in my lab who all happen to be female. And so I think it was it kind of gave them extra money for their honors theses and things like that. But yeah, and so, but I think what's nice is that it also, gives money to female scientists when they really need it, which is in their postdoc years. And a lot of the fellows use this money for salary, and especially because, and a lot of the fellows were new moms at the time, and so had recently taken maternity leave and needed an extra boost, an extra year to stay where they were at, to be competitive within their respective fields. And so I think it's great that L'Oreal, is there to support female scientists when they most need it, because it's at the postdoc years where female scientists start to drop out.
Yeah, so that's, at graduate school, half of the scientists are females, and then at postdoc, half of the scientists are females, but then when you get to tenure track, it drops to the 26%. So why do you think this is? Do you think it's that year?
Well, from, for all the women I know, I mean, it's really hard. People think that having a family and being a scientist are incompatible. And so the women I know and who are fantastic scientists who have gone into industry or other career paths thought that, that they wanted to focus on family and didn't want to have to battle getting grants and working, on the tenure clock and balancing a family. And it's really hard to do that. So.
Yeah. It's also, I would also add that we don't have, besides you and Sabrina Burmeister, I don't know that many other women with children who are PIs.
Yeah, here at Harvard, most of the women most of the women don't have children, number one, and if they do, they had them after they got tenure. And that was the advice that I got whenever I was a grad student, is to wait till I had my first RO1 or tenure to have babies.
But that's not the way that, the way that it's set up now, it doesn't work like that anymore.
It doesn't work like that.
People's PhDs are long, people's postdocs are long.
Yeah, and
biologically we cannot have children.
Yeah,
we keep waiting.
RO1s when they're first RO1 when they're 45,
yeah.
And so that was terrible advice. And so, but whenever I go give talks somewhere, that's the question that always gets asked is, I want to have babies. When do I do that? And there just is no good time. But what I would say is that you're never going to have more time than you do now. And so, you're not going to magically have more time when you get your own lab.
Yeah.
Now, and so, but the timing is different for everybody. But I think, wait until you get tenure, your first RO1 is terrible advice. I would never say that to anybody.
I think that's the problem, is that we don't have role models above us doing what we want to do and being where we want to be. And I think even some people with children aren't visible.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't, I don't want to see your kids at your office, but,
Oh, I have, you don't see this, but I have a bunch of toys everywhere. Because kids do come to my office, and that's just how it is. This is how this kind of thing functions. And so when I have to come on the weekends to check my frog experiments, they come with me, and they think frogs are just, they're just normal. They're just the things mommy has. Whenever my daughter is playing house and daycare, her teachers told me that she'll be like, okay, well, wait right here. I have to go feed the frogs. And then she'll pretend to go or do experiments or something. I have to go do experiments. Because that's just, part of her life and bringing them into campus. So I'm sorry. If you came here, you'd probably see my kids.
Yeah. No, of course. But, I have a good friend who's a young PI, and I told her, I only had 8 weeks of maternity leave, and it was unpaid. Science is ridiculous. And she's like, oh, my lab's just getting started. I came in with my newborn when she was 10 days old. It's
Mm-hmm.
you do what you have to do. It's not great, but I think, yeah.
Especially for postdocs, and you're right that there's no support. So no paid support, unless you, and then, your PI may or may not pay you during that time. And so, having a baby in your postdoc is just super hard. But that's the time that's best for most women.
Yeah, that's the other people that I know that have kids as scientists. That's when you got to go.
Yeah.
That's when it's your time.
That's another good thing about this fellow's job, is that it's a good time to have babies.
I'd really like to have a child, but I'm trying to get a fellowship. Yeah.
You have other people doing work for you in your lab, and so it's a good and you're not on a tenure clock, so it's actually it's really supportive, I think, to women who want to start families.
So where are you in your fellowship? Are you starting to apply for jobs this year?
Yeah, I will apply for a few. I have 2 years of money left, so I'm in my 4th year. So I'll probably apply a couple of places and then defer a year. And then if I don't get anything, apply more desperately.
I didn't saw my application before, but this year I'm desperate.
Yeah. I am not one. I will not put out like 69 applications or anything like that. I mean, it's going to be like 10 tops.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit because I want to make sure that you get some credit for one of the other aspects of your fellowship program, which I don't know whether it's a requirement of the Bauer Fellowship program or whether this is just something that you like to do, but the Little Froggers School program that you've got going on. Again, wrapping it all up with kids and science and take your frogs to school kind of thing.
Yeah.
Can you tell everybody a little bit about the Little Froggers School program that you've got set up?
Yeah, so that is not a requirement of having a fellowship. That's it's kind of a byproduct of having a colony and studying parental care, because we study adult frogs and they producing lots of babies. And at some point, I had like 5,000 tadpoles running around and no space for them. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do with all these frogs? And so I started the Little Froggers program. In partnership with some teachers here in Cambridge. And so we give frogs to classrooms. And then I've written, it's definitely not a book, it's like a little pamphlet about how to incorporate poison frog biology and chemistry into classrooms, and then at 8 different age-appropriate levels. So how to incorporate poison frog, and poison frogs into biology and chemistry and developmental biology and climate change, because if kids can see a real example, like right there in their classrooms, they're much more likely to remember general principles in ecology or chemistry than they are if they just see it in a book. And so, it just started off in Cambridge, and now it's in about, I think now, over 25 classrooms and across the U.S. And so that's the other thing that the L'Oreal for Women in Science Fellowship helped me do, was to really expand my outreach program. Because at first I was paying for, the frogs and the tanks and a lot of these things for the classrooms, and then that gave me some extra funds to be able to spread it out, and especially to rural communities, because I grew up on a farm where if you were a girl and liked science, you became a vet tech, not a vet, but a vet tech or a nurse. And so I had no idea that, like being a scientist in the rainforest was a viable career path. And so I've lately been focusing on rural communities rather than more well-off areas like Cambridge. And so, it's a program that's really important to me to expose girls and boys to cool science.
I think it's great. I mean, just looking through your website and the fact that you had curriculum stuff all figured out, and that you had ways to get these frogs out, and were making use of a plethora of frogs, like you said. I think it's an awesome idea, and I hope that it takes off and is well funded in all of your future career moves and endeavors.
Me too. Yeah, the teachers seem to love it. The feedback that we've gotten from the teachers is that the kids really love it, and that they're more likely to remember things about climate change or about ecology, and we're working on more specific chemistry curricula. But they're more likely to remember things whenever they're related to their classroom pets.
Yeah, I think it's a lot better than the hamster and the wheel.
Yeah.
So wait, do they keep the frogs indefinitely, or do they just grow up the tadpoles and then give them back to you in their froglets?
They can do both. So some classrooms prefer tadpoles so that the students can watch metamorphosis, and so they can either keep the froglets, or the next year they can return the froglets and then they can get tadpoles. Some teachers don't want to deal with having adult frogs who are reproducing a lot, and so they'll trade them in for younger frogs. And other teachers really like that. So I really try to tailor it to what that teacher wants to do and their goals in their classrooms, and how they want to use the frogs. And so I try to leave it up to them, to the teachers.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Well, we're pretty much out of time, but we want to make sure that everybody, especially the teachers at home that may want to start learning about introducing frogs to their students, where they can find you as well as all of your research and everything that you've got going on currently, which is a hell of a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, so all of my all of my info is on my website, which is o'connell.fast.harvard.edu, and they can contact me there, and it lists like what we do for classrooms and what the classrooms have to do for the frogs, because it's a team effort to feed them and to keep, wingless fruit flies going and things like that. And so it has a lot of details there, and they can also email me for a copy of the curricula that's age appropriate to their classrooms.
Cool. And then I think you also tweet a little bit, maybe not as much. So can people find you elsewhere online and keep track of all of your research and all the things that you're doing when you go on field work and conferences and off to Madagascar for National Geographic?
Yeah, so we have a lab Facebook page where I post things as we're in the field and do a lot of field updates there. And so, as well as our website, and then, I should be better about tweeting. Maybe I will in the future.
We'll include like your Twitter handle and all the sites along on our website so people can follow along.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, we'll make sure that all those are available to everybody in the show notes, which is at breakingbio.com. So you can follow along with Lauren's career and see all the crazy stuff she's getting up to right now. So I guess that's pretty much it. So we're going to wrap it up. We need to thank the European Society for Evolutionary Biology for giving us some funding to help get things online and across the airwaves into your ears, so you can hear about all the things our interesting guests are doing. And remember that you can find us online, like I said, at breakingbio.com, where we've got all of our old episodes and show notes for each of those episodes. You can follow us on Twitter by looking for @BreakingBio. And you can follow us on Facebook as well, where we post episodes and have slight little commentaries going on. That's by searching for the Breaking Bio podcast on Facebook. And, of course, take us with you on your walk to work or on your vacations and travels and conference season by searching us on iTunes and Stitcher. We need to thank Lauren again, because that was a really great conversation, and I hope everybody at home will join us again next time.